I'm Dr. Bruce Carlin. Welcome to Physician Focus with the Massachusetts Medical Society. The food we eat has an enormous effect on our health, yet for many of us, it's one of the least understood areas in health care. Many people, in fact, are confused by the overwhelming amount of information about what's healthy and what's not healthy. This edition of Physician Focus will try to clear away some of that confusion. We'll look at questions such as, how does food affect our health? What does eating healthy really mean? And how can we become better informed about the foods we buy and eat? We'll also review a list of items we see and hear about every day, getting our experts' opinions on such topics as organic food, gluten, artificial sweeteners, genetically modified organisms, and food labels. Our guests for this discussion are Dr. Edward Saltzman and Ms. Amy Taitch. Dr. Saltzman is the Academic Dean for Education at the Tufts University Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy, where he is also an Associate Professor of Nutrition. He is also an Associate Professor of Medicine and Chief of the Division of Clinical Nutrition at Tufts Medical Center. Ms. Taitch is a registered dietitian and weight loss counselor in the Energy Metabolism Lab at the Jean Mayer U.S. Department of Agriculture Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging at Tufts University. Welcome to you both, Ed and Amy. It's great to have you. Well, let's start with the most basic question. How does food affect our health? Ed.
Bruce, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Our food has a tremendous impact on our health and our well-being. So if you just start with your quality of life, obviously we enjoy the food we eat, and food can make or break a situation, a celebration. That's how we enjoy food. Also, food influences how we feel physically in the short term. So we may feel energetic, we may feel what some people would call logy. And then in the longer term, what we eat and the types of foods we eat, the nutrients, have a tremendous impact on our risk for a number of chronic diseases.
Amy, you have much to add to that?
No, I think Ed put it very eloquently.
Okay. So, just getting down to some basics now, with everybody dieting, what is the difference between hunger and feeling full?
Well, there are a number of biological systems that contribute to us feeling hungry, and after we eat, to us feeling full, and that leads to stopping eating. And then those systems also contribute to how long it is before we eat again and how much we subsequently eat later in the day or the next day. So there are a number of systems in the body that, if we paid attention to, would probably result in us eating less than many of us do in a typical day. So feeling full can be a biologic signal, but it also can be a sense that you've eaten enough because you've seen how much you've eaten. Similarly, hunger can be that empty feeling in your stomach growling because you haven't eaten for a number of hours. Or it might be an emotion that you're feeling that you're mistaking for hunger, such as loneliness, boredom, anxiety, that you actually can suppress to some extent by eating.
Amy, when you're designing diets, do you keep hunger versus feeling full in mind?
Hunger is a very important thing, and as we all probably know, is it's not very fun and it's not very pleasant. And so for someone to be successful with dieting or losing weight, then we try to avoid that hunger. And we can do that by many different ways. Typically, we try to choose foods that are going to please both the biological pathways as well as more of the environmental outside factors. So we want to make sure that the foods are satisfying. Typically we have fiber in our foods and some protein. And we also want to make sure that we are pleased with what we're eating. And so we feel like we've eaten something, we're satisfied, we're full, we can go ahead and move on to our next task.
So how does this play into, how does your diet play into chronic disease? What are the factors where we have to modify things for our chronic diseases?
Well, one factor is what you weigh. And over the last several decades, actually over the last probably 40 to 50 years, as a population, we've gained weight. The average American gains a pound or so every year. And so obesity, or excess body fat, contributes to risk for a number of diseases, especially type 2 diabetes, but also heart disease, stroke, arthritis, especially in the knees and hips, as well as a host of other diseases. As a matter of fact, when I'm teaching medical students, one of the things I say to them is, I challenge you to name one organ system in the body that is not adversely affected by being obese. In addition to obesity, the composition of our diet has a tremendous impact on risk for a number of diseases. The one that many people may be familiar with is the effect of diet on risk for cardiovascular disease. Now, historically, we have associated intake of saturated fat and somewhat more recently trans fat with risk for heart disease. So that's just one example. Actually, there are now some people who are challenging whether saturated fat is as bad for us as originally proposed, but I think for the time being, we can assume that, that saturated fat is not the healthiest choice.
So how do we go about choosing our foods? You were talking about how yesterday's truth gets challenged and new things come out. The old teaching was that we had to be careful with the food pyramid, which I think went out about 5 years ago. What are we doing now? What's right?
Right. The food pyramid's out, and right now we have the My Plate method. And so the nice thing about My Plate is it's something that we can really relate to because we all have used plates. And so basically when you're thinking about a plate, a 9-inch plate, now most plates that we have nowadays are 12 inches and they actually wouldn't fit into your grandmother's cabinets anymore because they're so big. So thinking about a 9-inch plate, we want to cut that plate in half and have half your plate be fruits and vegetables, and then a quarter of your plate would be the grains or the starches, and a quarter of your plate would be the meat and the protein, and then a serving of low-fat dairy. And right there we're getting at a diet that has adequate nutrients to really sustain a healthy life and reduce the risk of many chronic diseases.
And at the same time deal with your issues about hunger.
Exactly. It has enough, it's enough, the macronutrients, enough fiber, enough protein, and it really is very colorful as well, and so it'll help with the outside appeal of making it satisfying in order to eat it.
Now, Amy mentioned macronutrients. Those are carbohydrates, protein, and fat, basically the nutrients that provide calories or energy, but there are many different forms of those so-called macronutrients. So for instance, when we consume carbohydrates, they can be in a form where they're as close to possible as the whole grain, such as a whole oat or a wheat berry or a minimally processed oat or wheat. And then there are whole grain flours, and then there are refined products. And I think one of the trends that most people would agree with these days is that the more intact, the more whole the food, the better.
Closer to the original.
Yeah, closer to the
Exactly.
original, sort of less processed.
The less steps it takes from the food to get to your table, the better.
And with all these foods, you're, how do you manage the picking of these foods? Are we? How do I know what it is? I mean, I think people generally know what a starch is, but how do we know when we're buying the food what we're getting?
Right, so what's in a food? And that can be really difficult to know. However, we have this useful thing called the nutrition facts label, and so with it we can really we can glean all the information that we need.
So where do we find these? We look this on everything we buy?
It should be on all more of the processed foods. So if it's in a package or it has some kind of covering, it should have a nutrition facts label. Now, an apple or something that we just have to pick up and eat, likely it's not going to have a nutrition facts label.
But you're telling me those are generally good
But
because
those are
they're
generally,
not processed.
Those are definitely good choices, yeah. So the processed foods are the ones that we want to be more aware of. And so there's also some exciting changes with the nutrition facts label. And there's the proposed changes. If we see the nutrition facts label on the left is the new and proposed changes while compared to the one on the right. And the nutrition facts label that they're thinking of changing is a little bit more reader friendly. And unfortunately, when people look at the nutrition facts label, they don't read it correctly. So when we're looking at a nutrition facts label, it's really important to look at the serving size. And the serving size you can find on the top of the facts label, and that's what is the whole label is talking about. So in this case,
so if you buy something and you're saying, oh boy, it's a quarter cup of raisins and you're having 3 handfuls, it's going to be a little different.
Right, exactly. So that's a great point. It comes into the fact of we're doing portion sizes versus serving sizes. So the nutrition facts label will recommend a serving size, but that may not be the portion size that we're actually consuming.
Our family is guilty of a lot of that.
Well, a lot of people are. The nice thing is that with these new changes that they're proposing for the facts label, they are also changing the serving sizes. So for example, ice cream, it used to be half a cup of ice cream. Most people don't eat half a cup of ice cream. So now it's becoming a cup of ice cream. So these changes will reflect what people typically eat. So it should be a little bit easier for readers and for consumers to be able to look at the label and find their information.
And it's all the way down the side there. You've got the serving size, the calories, total fat, cholesterol, sodium, total carbohydrates, protein, it's all there.
And now with the new proposed changes, it should be a little bit easier to see because it's in bold. You can really see the calories. They definitely stand out and are much more prevalent, which is very nice. There's also, if you look down there, right in the bottom, there are some changes in the nutrients that are on there. We have potassium and vitamin D, which most Americans aren't consuming enough of. So you can glean a lot of information from the nutrition facts label. It's very important to look because unfortunately most Americans aren't looking at the nutrition facts label, and if they are, they're not reading it correctly.
So the important things are the serving size, total number of calories that you're taking in, and then making sure that you balance what you're eating.
Exactly. We want to look at some of those nutrients. And so, for example, we want to make sure that we are lower in saturated fat and that we're lower in trans fat and that we have a product that's higher in fiber.
Sounds great. So let's go through a few terms because before we started this, you two came up with a bunch of things to look at. And I'm going to throw out a term, and I want each of you, Ed and Amy, to comment on it. Gluten.
Gluten is...
It's a hot topic right now.
Well, I'll defer to Amy to go first.
Sure. So gluten is one of those buzzwords that we have right now in the food industry. And so there are some people that their doctors have prescribed a gluten-free diet, and so therefore they must follow the gluten-free diet for their health. However, if the doctors haven't prescribed a gluten-free diet, a lot of people are still consuming that. And the research shows that a gluten-free diet is not necessarily healthier than a diet that contains gluten. And unfortunately, it might actually be a little bit lacking in some of the nutrients. So all in all, a gluten-free diet is not a healthier choice unless you are medically prescribed.
Sensitive.
Exactly. Then by all means, you should certainly consume it.
But then, in my practice, I probably have a half dozen patients at most who are truly gluten sensitive, and we test them. The blood test is pretty easy to do.
Although I would just to add that there is some recent evidence emerging that suggests that there are different types of disorders related to gluten. The classic one is called celiac disease or celiac sprue, and people who have this disorder must absolutely avoid all gluten. And gluten is commonly found in certain grains, in our diet especially wheat, but also in rye. There are smaller amounts in some other grains, but it's also important that when grains are made to, say, make vinegar, or distilled vinegar, there also can be gluten there, so some cosmetics or hygienic products may contain gluten. So people really need to look at labels. Now, in contrast to people who have this condition called celiac disease, which is a specific immune disease, there are people who may be gluten sensitive. And those people don't have this serious life-threatening disorder when they consume gluten, but they may be sensitive and it may cause discomfort, especially in the abdomen. It may affect their sense of well-being. And you're absolutely right, there are excellent blood tests for celiac disease, but for these other types of sensitivities, there are really no good tests to diagnose it. So many people will embark on a gluten-free diet and say they feel better. And I think Amy and I would agree that if you feel better and you have a balanced diet and it's a healthy diet, then that's great.
Go for it.
Go for it, right. But it's a hard diet, though.
All right. Second term, holiday weight gain. Go ahead, Amy, you take that one first.
Sure. So most Americans gain about 5 pounds over the holidays because we just have an abundance of food. There's always a special eating occasion. And it's very important for us to realize that and listen to our bodies and listen to our hunger when we're eating, and be mindful of the foods. So if you've ever tried taking a chocolate or a raisin and just one and really enjoying eating it and feeling how it affects you, you kind of are aware of how food is pleasurable. But oftentimes in the holidays, we have this big thing of cookies and we're just piling them in. So a big thing to be aware of is thinking about mindful eating and then keeping in mind still that plate method can be very helpful and trying to make sure that we still have portion control.
And holiday weight gain is very, very real, and not everybody loses the weight they gain, and it can accumulate from year to year. One strategy that I would recommend that people also consider is to look at their immediate environment, whether it's home or work or school, and if there are dishes of very palatable, good-tasting foods out there because it's the holidays, you can actually ask your colleagues or friends or family members to try to minimize the celebration with food and just have those particularly tasty foods on a limited number of occasions and celebrate in other ways.
Another strategy too is to bring your own food. So if you know that you're going to go somewhere and there's going to be some delicious food that's going to tempt you, if you bring a healthier option that you can therefore eat and still be satisfied, still take part in the joyous activities, that can be another way to be successful.
I think our earlier discussion was about hunger versus satiety or
fullness. Yeah.
Fullness. And this is sort of the opposite of that. How do you know when you're not sated and you're just eating for the pure pleasure of it? Do you have any tricks on that, or is it still the same thing, portion control? Or
It's some of the same things, but it's definitely very difficult because when we have more of we're not hungry, but we want to feel satisfied, it's more of an urgent need. I need to eat, I need to eat. So another way to kind of combat that is go ahead and have a little portion of it and try to eat it nice and slowly, and then move away from wherever that food item is so that you are taking away some of that trigger.
I tell my patients, you can have seconds, but wait 20 minutes.
That's another good point. It takes 20 minutes for your brain and your stomach to connect and say, I'm full, I don't need to eat anything else.
Yeah. And yet you can put a whole meal's worth of calories in your mouth in 20 seconds, not 20 minutes. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, next one. High fructose corn syrup. Ed, why don't you
Well,
take this one?
this is another really hot topic. And the issue is this, that high fructose corn syrup is manufactured from corn starch, or the carbohydrates in corn, which normally don't have much fructose. It's manufactured because it creates the type of sweetness in a form that we like and that is convenient and affordable for industry. Some people would say that the way we metabolize fructose is different than the way we metabolize other sweeteners or carbohydrates. The evidence is very mixed. Some people will claim that high fructose or high doses of fructose contribute to weight gain and diabetes risk. That's been found in some studies, whereas in other studies that hasn't been found. And if you actually look at the naturally occurring fructose, there is virtually no evidence that naturally occurring fructose, say in fruits or some vegetables or in other types of carbohydrates, contributes to weight gain or diabetes at all.
Something I want to add too is high fructose corn syrup, it is an added sugar. And so in our diets, it's healthful to try to reduce how much sugar that we consume and that we're taking in. So regardless of the fact that is this debate on if it makes you gain more weight, it's an added sugar and it's something that we want to limit, along with the table sugar and other sugars as well.
It's like saying don't have soft drinks, drink water. That's the best way to slake your thirst. And you don't need all that extra sugar. So, so whether it by itself does anything, as you say, that's up for grabs. But it's
Still
the fact of it. It's an added sugar.
Well, but allow me to anticipate your next question.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you don't have a naturally or a sweetened beverage or food that has added sugars, then what will make things sweet? And we're talking about artificial sweeteners. Actually, technically the name is non-caloric sweeteners because some aren't really artificial. They actually occur in nature. The jury is also out with non-caloric sweeteners. There are some claims that having sweet foods, even with non-caloric sweeteners, essentially conditions us to want sweet foods that have sugars. That's there's mixed evidence for that. Other people would claim there are certain neurologic or other disorders associated with non-caloric sweeteners, or that they might cause cancer. For most of these, again, there is very mixed evidence. I personally believe that most of the sweeteners on the market are safe to be consumed in the doses that we usually consume them. But if it bothers you, I would say find another sweetener or avoid those types of products.
Less is more.
Right.
I was just thinking that at least one of our sweeteners is nothing more than sugar with bleach. And when I think of it that way, it's not as exciting to have.
Well, it's chloride, not really bleach. You're not ingesting bleach.
Sodium. Should we limit it?
So that's another one that's more of a hot topic lately too, with sodium. And so we all know that high levels of sodium have led to some heart problems, some cardiovascular disease, among others. And research has shown that when you have a diet that's lower in sodium or salt, that you're able to reduce your blood pressure, have decreased risk of mortality and of stroke. However, there's another end of that spectrum where there's some emerging research examining sodium intake and too low. That's still kind of coming down the pike, as we say in Massachusetts, but it's something to look for. And unfortunately, the biggest problem is that the food sources that we all have available to us are processed. And processed foods typically have a lot of sodium and salt, and so we're consuming more than our bodies are used to. And so it's really important, again, back to that whole foods that we talked about earlier, less steps from where the source of the food to how it got to our table is better. It's going to have more nutrition and, in that fact, less sodium.
And the less additives.
And less additives, exactly.
The fewer additives.
And your food label will help identify the sodium there. Just one practical point, and that's if you're trying to decrease your sodium or salt intake, you will miss it at first. So you might try to decrease it gradually, but also you should know that you are going to miss it, but after a period of time, could be weeks or longer, you will no longer miss it, and the amount of salt in food that you previously consumed will seem excessively salty to you.
And there is some food science behind salt too, and if we oversalt our food, we're actually not tasting the flavors of the food as well. So sometimes people notice is when they use less salt, they're like, wow, I can really taste, for example, the asparagus, or really taste the flavor of the food that they're eating. So that can be a pleasant surprise as well.
The time has flown, and you've been wonderful guests, and we've got so much more to discuss. We're going to do another second show, so please join us next time for Food and Your Health Part 2. My thanks to our guests, Dr. Ed Saltzman and Amy Taitch. In the meantime, for more information about food and your health and to view past physician-focused programs on a variety of health topics, visit our website at physicianfocus.org. I'm Dr. Bruce Carlin. Thank you for watching.
I'm Dr. Ed Saltzman. The amount and kinds of foods we eat have an enormous impact on our health. Foods with high levels of added sugar, salt, and sometimes the fats, along with limited physical activity, may lead to high rates of obesity. That in turn can lead to chronic conditions such as diabetes and heart disease. Healthy eating promotes good health and reduces the risk for chronic illness. Here are 4 tips to get you on the right track. Watch your calorie intake. The formula is simple. The more calories we consume without physical activity to burn those calories, the more weight we gain. Eat more nutrient-dense foods such as fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean meats. Decrease your consumption of foods and drinks with added sugars. And read food labels when you shop to determine the amount of fat, sodium, sugar you may be consuming. For more information on healthy eating, visit the Centers for Disease Control at cdc.gov.
I'm Dr. Robert Schreiber.
And I'm Jennifer Raymond.
Chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, and chronic pain are a leading cause of death and disability in the U.S.
Some 90 million Americans are affected by these conditions, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reports that 2 out of 3 older Americans have multiple chronic conditions.
Traditional care of chronic disease has focused on the physician's role in caregiving, but a new model is emerging, that of patient self-management.
The Healthy Living Center of Excellence is a collaboration between Elder Services of the Merrimack Valley and Hebrew Senior Life, a medical provider with a goal of helping seniors remain independent and in the community as long as possible.
By combining expertise in the aging and medical networks, the collaborative offers a variety of programs throughout Massachusetts that encourage older adults to become partners in managing their health.
For more information on how you can participate, visit healthylivingforme.org or call 1-800-892-0890.